Good evening, people. Welcome. Gosh, I'm seeing some of my favorite people here already. Gil, welcome. Thank you for moderating this evening. Utah Mike, same with you. And Little Lone Prepper. Butch Graves, welcome. And Butch, aren't you in Utah? No, you're in Colorado. I was thinking you're in Utah. Let me see. And Diana, too. And gosh, Utah Mike. I wonder, what is that name, Utah? Where have I seen that before? What does that have to do with anything? Thank you. And Muskoka Oma, wow, welcome. Great. Good to see y'all. We'll wait just a minute or two before we get on. We are so lucky this evening to have John Grammer, author of Infiltrated. And he and I were talking, and you all have seen basically what my philosophy is as an intelligence analyst. And so, hello, F. Pierre. Welcome. Good evening. And so I've always been pretty much against the idea of a red dawn being brought upon us. But when I see what has happened with the Chinese infiltration of the United States, and then, of course, as John writes about in his book, and we'll be talking about this in more detail, what's happening here, the infiltration that's happening here in his book, and the reality of that happening, it is just so, I want to say coincidental, but something tells me it's a little bit more than coincidental. I think he kind of picked up on the what's going on in the world and has put it into a novel so that we can understand what's going on. So what I would like to do is number one, it's a phenomenal book. I would like to have book 2 as soon as it comes out. We're probably looking at that being somewhere around August or September, if I'm not mistaken. So we will have book 2 in our reading club for August or September. So for those of you who do not have book 1, get it, catch up, and that way we can do it again in August or September and review book 2. So without anything else to do, what I would like to do is introduce one of my new favorite authors, John Grammer, author of Infiltrated, and just ask him to introduce himself and tell you a little bit about himself. So Mr. Grammer, if you would, please.
Hi, I'm John Grammer, new author. It's my first book. I born and raised in the Wasatch Front. I've lived throughout the country a little bit, but this is my home, and I'm glad to be back here. I've been here back about 12 years, but I run and operate a appliance repair business is my main job until I can write full time. Just always wanted to write, and I saw what was going on with some of the things that's happened in the last few years and decided to put the story I had in my head on paper.
So we were talking backstage, and as is quite typical, we saw this with Chris Weatherman in his book A American, the survivalist series. We saw it with Ken Horton and his books. And we've seen it with Steve Smith and his books and the Stonemont series. But we quite often have a lot of the characters in our books who are kind of patterned after friends, relatives, and everything else. I have yet to see an author with a book where the wife the wife of the hero does not have the same name as the wife of the author. So I haven't asked you that yet. How is your wife Allison or Ann?
Terry.
Huh?
My wife's name is Terry. So that
we've broken the mold. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, let's get into the book because I think there's some really good things in here. People really need to pick up on. I've got once again one of my famous 5x8 cards. We got a lot of good notes. You can tell that John has a lot of experience in the prepper community because there are some nuanced things, and he's taught me a thing or two too in this book, and I've been doing this quite a while, but there are some really good things in here that you need to pick up on. And so the first thing that I picked up on was JD and Jack were talking, and they basically had a code that they used to switch communications, meaning switch frequencies or how they were going to communicate with each other and when they were going to communicate with each other. So that's a little bit of what we call SIGSEC or signal security or ComSec, communication security. And so having a plan on code words on when you think people are listening to you to switch frequencies, channels, modes of communication or whatever are going to be very, very beneficial to you. And another one there was that they had code names for things that they didn't want people to pick up on. So in the case where they were talking about having weapons, they referred to them as their friends. How many friends do you have, and all that kinds of stuff. So there's very astute stuff in the book. He also talks about having multiple radios. And one of the things we really found out, and you can see this in John Jacob Schmidt's book, The Partisan Journals, and that's strictly on communications. That's all he talks about, is the interoperability of GMRS and FRS, and then, of course, having CB as well. Now, CB has a little bit longer range because it's an AM signal, amplitude modulated. It's in the high 29 megahertz, almost in the VHF range. But FMRS and GMRS, FRS and GMRS are both FM line of sights. So you get a little bit clearer signal with the FRS GMRS, but it is line of sight. So you don't get any of that AM scatter that you will with a little bit of CB. Not that much with CB, but you will. JD admonishes Jack in the book and says, don't say too much over the radio. And I think that's a key. John, what was he thinking there?
Well, it's not private. I mean, everybody, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and everyone had a CB in their car. You're driving down the road, you're hearing everyone's conversations, and my dad also I grew up in the HVAC industry back before cell phones, when you had a truck radio and you could hear everyone's conversation about the customers with the office, even if it wasn't your customer. And so I just always knew that radios aren't secure like a telephone, but most people are so used to using telephones, they don't realize that. And so they'll give their names, where their locations are, all this stuff, that basically if there's someone out there looking for you or someone that wants to do something nefarious, you gave them all the information they need.
Right. Hello, Sue Me, and hello, Triple G Farms. Welcome. Good to see both of you. Sue Me is from Canada, and Triple G Farms is just up the road here, close enough where we can have a little hour-long trip and go have lunch together. So, two great subscribers that we have here in the book. You talk about something about the first 3 days of SHTF. So something happens, and this is one of my things as well. I talk to people quite a bit about the fact that for the first couple of days you're going to be outside barbecuing, grilling. You want to get everything cooked while your neighbors are cooking. You want to do what they're doing. You want to blend in with them, and then as they start to dwindle in their cooking, that's when you want to shift indoors and you want to have odorless cooking. So you want to, use something that you can't smell the smoke of your cooking or boiling water and add it to something so you have food that nobody knows you're eating while they're out there starving. Kind of that parallel is here in the book. On page 63, you're talking about the first 3 days after SHTF are the worst for panic. So tell us your interpretation of that. How is that going to look? What is it? How are people going to be acting?
Well, I think in the first few hours, I'd say even the first 12 hours, unless it's a huge event like in the book where it's just chaotic and a huge terrorist attack throughout the country. If it's just something regional or something like Katrina, the first few hours, people are probably just thinking it's no big deal. But after that, they're going to start to realize, depending on what time of year it is, we don't have heat or we don't have AC, so it's going to get real uncomfortable real fast. But the criminals will take advantage of the chaos, the criminal mindset. They may not be criminals like doing criminal things. They may just be normal people that they kind of restrain their criminal activities because they want to be part of society. But when they realize there's no one here to stop us from doing stuff, they're going to start slowly, everyone else, all the criminals that are criminals anyways, I think they're going to be taking advantage of it from the get-go. But then you have the secondary people, because I think most of us, I have a firm belief that most people only are marginally good at best. You know, there's like 5 or 10% of the human population that are really good people, and the rest are just really struggling with being good. Like they really try to be good, but they're not necessarily. So if you don't have that structure of society around you, a lot of people are going to go bad real fast. And whether it's a choice or whether it's a panic.
A prominent theme in this book that I think is going to be continued to develop are the bad guys who got out of prison or got out of jail or whatever. How do you see that happening?
Well, we hear, I don't know if this is throughout the country is this way, but in our county jail holds about 1,100 people. And they hold everyone from your minor, didn't pay your traffic ticket, to full-on murderers. Like we had a guy, and they're there, they are there. It doesn't matter what you committed, how bad the crime is. You're there until you get sentenced to prison. And so there's different, like there's minimum security and stuff, but it's all one place, and it's run by the sheriff's department. And even the people around here don't think that there's really bad people there, but there is. If you have the sheriffs, if it's run by the sheriff's department and you have something big go on, and these people have families, they're going to go take care of their families. So they've got 2 options: lock the doors and let them starve to death, or unlock the doors. So that's going to be something they're going to have to wrestle with is, do we let these guys go? Because most of the people in that jail aren't really bad people that we know of, but there are a lot that are. I'd say probably 200 of them in there are really bad people. And so they're going to have to make that decision, and most people are probably going to say, just, we'll deal with that later.
How soon do you think that'll happen after SHTF?
Depends on the power situation. I think that's the big thing is as long as they continue to, we have electricity and water and the infrastructure is intact, I think it will probably stay there to the duration of the infrastructure. As soon as that infrastructure breaks down and they can't take care of the prisoners, that's when I think they're either going to let them go, or there's going to be, if there's not already prison riots, from them, but that they're either going to have to let them go, or they're going to have to move them somewhere or dispose of them somehow,
Yeah, even something as innocuous as a trucker strike. If you don't have food being delivered to the prison, then and you can't feed the prisoners, then I'm sure that the sheriff's deputies would do something a little bit different than normal.
Yeah, and so I think that and I hit on that in the second book too, a little bit about what went on, how they were released, kind of thing. But that's how I see it going is just more of a depends on it really just depends on our infrastructure and how bad it is. Like if it's still up and going, I think they'll keep them there as long as they can, because they know how bad some of these people are.
There's a couple of really good suggestions here, and this all happens right around page 68. It says no power equals no work equals no sewage, and I was so happy to see you talking about that, because that's one of my biggest concerns is Katrina, when you saw the Super Bowl or Superdome or whatever, and just the raw sewage flowing out of the restrooms and everything else, and then the diseases that are going to happen as a result of that are just unbelievable. But I think that people don't take waste management and waste handling serious enough, and that's going to be a killer in a post-apocalyptic world or a post-SHTF world. That we need to get that under control. I'm so happy you mentioned it in your book. Then you have 2 or 3 other suggestions. These just came bang, bang, bang right there all together, which are just phenomenal. Make sure everything you have that runs on electricity is charged all the time. Fill all your bottles with water. So, and I have a schedule on my calendar. I keep telling you all, you need a journal. You need to keep track of everything in your journal. You need to, write down when you do certain things, different colors for different meanings or whatever. And one of those has got to be change out your water on a regular basis too. But make sure you get all your water bottles filled. And then you talk about a trench and wire obstacle or barrier so that people can't come in and harass you. Really interesting. There's can we call it a knife fight? I guess, John, and one of the rules he says is you stab the squishy part and go primarily for the throat, the eyes, and the genitals in a knife fight. So sounds like you might have had a little bit of either training or experience or witnessed some of this.
No, I haven't, but I have watched a lot of war movies. And one of the movies, they were talking about this guy, and it was like a medieval type thing. He killed a lot of people, and they were like, basically, he's like, you whittle away at them. You don't have to go for the kill shot every time. He cut cut them where he could, anytime he could. Stab them in the armpit, stab them in the leg, stab them. The more times you hit them, the weaker they become. That's how you get the kill shot. Well, the fastest way to bring someone down is to punch them right in the throat, because it'll either swell up their larynx and they can't breathe, or you don't want to do that in a regular fight. I mean, that's fighting for your life because you don't want to kill someone. But as if you're a young person who is weaker than someone else, yeah, there is no rules. If you're not breaking the rules and you're fighting, you're not winning. That's just how I look at it. Is what's the easiest place for someone small to if they have a knife? Just stab them right in the genitals, right in the throat, anywhere that knife's going to easily go in, because everything else is covered in most people, except for their throats, their face, their armpits. And if, that's just kind of my philosophy. I've never really had any fighting training.
We just had Jack join us as well from Australia. So welcome, Jack. And Sumi is from Canada, but she's in Ohio this week. So welcome. One of the other things is we do a little bit of prison ministry, and one of the things we found out was that when they have a shank, they don't just stab once; they keep multiple stabs, because what they want to do is they want to create enough trauma to where you can't get all of it under control at any one time. So the more often you puncture, the better off you're going to be in any situation. So don't count on it just being once. Do it multiple times. So John, let me see. Utah Mike asked a question here and says, what is your plan for heat in a grid down winter?
Well, the place I'm in right now has no fireplace, no chimney, nothing like that. We actually have I haven't purchased it yet, but those stoves that you use for like the Kodiaks, the tent wall stoves. Mm-hmm. I'm going to put one on because they have a mat you can get. I was just going to put one in the basement and chimney it out the window. That's how I'm going to do it. I have an RV that has a propane furnace and that works if it gets to the point. But the location we're in right now, that's where we're lacking, is heat, and we know that.
I always get confused whether it's Instafire Vesta or Vesta Instafire, but one of them is the name of the company and the other is the name of the product. But there's this little black, I put it up. I used to keep it right over here. This little black heater, and it has a thermoelectric power generator for the fan. But you use 3 of those little safe heats that you get at Sam's Club for the
Sternos
serving line. Yeah, and so I told one of my friends about that here a couple of years ago, and he bought one, and he lives in a mobile home. And it was during Snowmageddon. He said that he kept that in his room in his motorhome or mobile home, and it kept his room at 57 degrees throughout the entire Snowmageddon. So I thought that was pretty good.
I think Patriot Pantry, or not Patriot Pantry. I think whoever does the Ready Hour foods, I think they have.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it before on theirs. But yeah, we're gonna have to do something like that. I mean, they have a battery. Milwaukee has a battery-powered oil heater or diesel. It's a diesel fuel heater that's safe for indoors, but it's run by a battery instead of it's like a construction heater, but it's made, you can use it inside. And so that was another thing we were looking at doing.
Okay. Of course, I'm big on personal hygiene, and so that's on page 110. We talk a lot about personal hygiene, taking using water for a shower and how to take showers. So page 104, we talk about a need to suppress your emotions and vengeance. That we've got to find a way to maintain our humanity. This was when JD encountered the 5 shooters, and so. How do you envision that happening? How do we keep ourselves, because we're going to be on a constant edge, and that edge is going to be between civility and what do we call it, animal instinct. So how are we going to be able to keep ourselves from crossing that line? And if we do cross that line, how's the best way to get back on the right side of that line?
Well, I think the hardest part is going to be not crossing that line when someone hurts your family, because a lot of people just see red and they don't see, all they see is and that's what JD, I made that point because I wanted people to feel, if it was your family, what would you do? How would you need someone there to pull you back. For me, it's my wife. She pulls me back from the edge when I see red, and, but I think it's going to be, naturally people are going to it's just going to revert back to like old West, just, kill first, ask questions later kind of thing. And there are going to be situations you probably have to do that. But the biggest thing is you make sure that when you commit violence, you do it to save someone's life. You do it to preserve life. No, you don't do it just to do it, and you don't do it as a punishment unless it's obviously you need to execute someone for murdering or something like that. But if you look at it as you're killing these people to save your family, that's, to me, because if you let those people go, they will wreak havoc throughout your community and kill more people. So I just look at it that way. But it's going to be a constant struggle, I think, for everyone. And you got to be close to God. You got to be close to your family, and you got to have someone there that will tell you you've gone too far.
Absolutely. There's and then kind of a political statement. I get just a little bit of insight, I believe, into your political beliefs on page 144, talking about specifically DHS and FEMA and the possibility, I guess, of a camp that's going to be emerging in Provo. I believe in that area, just north of the area where all this is happening. And it says that they are there to control the guns, the ammo, and the food, because in almost every situation, when you do those 3, it's called population control. So that kind of gives us a little bit of insight into what you think. And how do you think they're going to go about accomplishing that?
Well, they're trying to do it right now. I mean, the first thing, to control a population, the first thing you have to do is take their weapons, because then they can't fight back. They won't be able to. And I'm not talking about full-on war. I'm just talking, they won't be able to. Then you can control everything else. You can control the protests if they're protesting against whatever, free speech or whatever. You can control that because you're the only one that has the weapons. I mean, the old adage, the guy who has the gold makes the rules. Well, the guy who has the gun makes the rule too, And so it's just kind of, that's step one for any country, any regime, to control the population. And then the other, you look at these communist countries throughout the last century. How did they control their population? Well, they starved them to death if they didn't comply, or they just weren't the kind of people they wanted. They didn't give them any food. So if you have the food, first of all, you have to have a gun, because if you don't have the guns, but you have all the food, the people with the guns are going to take the food. Yeah. And so you have step 1 is the food, is the gun. Step 2 is the food. And then you can control, because how else are they going to survive? People, when you're hungry, you'll do anything for food.
And that's exactly the purge that happened by Stalin in Ukraine in the 1930s. So yeah, that has a historical basis. That has happened in a massive way in the past. I like this code. They were talking. They had guard duty, and so they wanted a code. And one of the codes that they had, so that in case other people were listening on the radio, was Wade's cows are out, meaning that there's been an infiltration of other people into the compound area. I thought that was really good. Here's a fantastic idea, people. I tell you, this book has all these little things in it that you need to pay attention to. And it really got me thinking. And on page 177, they're talking about celebrating and having oatmeal. Now, you know how I feel about oatmeal. But they have a celebration. They got the oatmeal. They put the oatmeal. They cook the basic oatmeal. And then they have areas where they have freeze-dried berries or nuts or sugar or cinnamon or whatever, so that you can personalize what was mass cooked. So I think the main thing that I got out of that was cook plain and allow people to customize, to personalize what it is that they are going to be eating out of that plain cooking common pot, let's call it. And do you want to extrapolate on that a little bit there?
But that's how we cook. I've got some picky eaters. One of my sons is autistic. I've got a daughter that's got some texture issues. So like on taco night, that's how we do tacos. I do the ground beef. They have nachos, tortillas, whatever, all the fixings on the table, and they fix what they want. That way, but the reason we do it that way is because if you say you fix a pot of oatmeal and it's all brown sugar and maple and brown sugar. Not everyone likes maple and brown sugar, so it's not all going to get eaten. You're going to have leftovers, which is a waste. And when you're in a situation like this, where you can't waste food, you can always make more, but you don't want to have any leftovers. And so that's just kind of how we've always done any kinds of like big meals or anything like that. We do when we do barbecues with everyone. We have hamburger night. We do hamburger bars or that kind of thing, or we'll bake a bunch of potatoes and everyone just puts whatever fixings they want on them instead of having it be one person cook everything the same way. It's just, I don't know. To me, that's common sense. It's just how in our younger years, when our kids were young, we didn't have a lot of money. So that was the way we figured out how to not waste the food and get the picky eaters to eat.
Utah Mike, I think you have a very good question, and I think you have the same dilemma all of us have. I look around here, and I know people are going to be wanting to burn fence posts and construction lumber and everything else that has some carcinogenic things in it when they burn. And most people don't realize that you need to age wood when you cut it before you burn it, or else you're going to get way too much. What's it called? I want to call it creosote, but I'm not sure if that's the right term. But it's going to be very smoky. It's not going to give you the heat that you want. You have to cure it for at least 6 months. And so I don't think people are going to have that time frame in their minds of establishing, preparing now for wood later. So I think the question you're asking, I don't know in an urban or suburban area if anybody has a good answer for that. That's one of the things where probably rural area is going to be a little bit better off, because at least you're going to have some wood that you can cut down, some old wood that you can use until you get the new wood cured. So, John, as far as heating, do you have any other ideas as far as heating your home?
One of the things you would do too is if you have a very large home, is you would basically live in part of your home and only heat that. Another thing that we're prepared to do is put a tent up in the living room, because you've got a shelter inside of a shelter. Your body heat when you're in that tent will keep you alive at night. You're still going to be cold during the day, but it's not going to be life-threatening. But propane, having a little propane heater, those little Mr. Buddy heaters that you get for camping, they're about $60. They take a 1-pound green canister. They will keep a good size. You're going to have to just move into one room. Store a bunch of those. Just buy a few cases of those, and you're going to all have to sleep in one room. but it'd be warm. And one of those will, like my son has a 12x14 Kodiak tent. He puts one of those up in the middle of the mountains when he's hunting in Colorado, and it's snow on the ground. It's 60 degrees in that tent, and he uses one canister for the whole weekend he's there. So they're way more efficient than you would think they are.
So one of the things that we're talking about is basically creating a micro environment. And so the micro environment that was done in the old days was called the canopy bed. So basically, if you take a look at it, they had curtains all around the bed as well as a canopy up on top. So you've got basically a tent inside of a building. So the body heat inside that canopy bed is what we were counting on to keep you warm inside the bed in the evening. So anytime you can create a micro environment, have a smaller area to either cool or heat, it's going to be much, much more efficient.
And get underground. If you have a basement, live in the basement because it's going to be warmer than upstairs.
Another one is on page 181, and this is JD talking. But for those of you who have not read the book, you need to. And JD is the hero. And he's talking to the people. And he's just saying, hey, look, we have to face it. We are going to lose people. Not everybody's going to make it through this. And so I think sometimes we have to be very realistic. You know, I'm not even sure if I'll make it past the first day or two. You know, we've got to take a look at what is it we're doing. How do we pass that on, and how do we incorporate the maximum participation in order to get that done? But in order to keep people from losing their cookies, we also need to be realistic, and that is the fact that some people are not destined to make it through to the other side. Oh, here's one. So they were. Oh, who is it? I think is it Allison or Ann? Is the construction person?
Allison.
It's Allison, and so they're trying to convert the quarry and turn it into. So they've gone basically from JD's house over to Wade's farm, trying to find better places, more secure places that have everything necessary: water, housing, grazing area for the cattle, and all this kinds of stuff. And they realized that by having the grazing area for the cattle. And this is another critical thing that you need to take. It really doesn't come out point blank, but it's really well presented. And that is, the more prepared you are, the more of a target you're going to be for other people. So if you have a farm, if you have animals, if you have a stockpile of wood, if you have things that are visible to the outside that people have not prepared and need, that's going to become a target for them to come take it from you. Okay, so that's what's happening at Wade's farm. Is people are seeing the cattle, they're seeing the produce and everything else that's going on, and all of a sudden it becomes a threat to stay there. So now they're going to build this quarry out and turn it into an alternative, or let's call it an Alamo for lack of a better word. Allison is there, and she's trying to build some framework, I guess, for some things. They convert some old porta potties into and which I love. Remember, I'm the poop guy, so they're converting these porta potties into outhouses. But Allison has to take a look because she runs out of nails and screws. And so, you know, one of the things that you got to pick out of this book is make sure as you're doing your preparations that you're also considering what kind of construction materials do I need to have on hand. You know, screws, angle iron, cement, nails, the tools to do it. I'm guessing that she has a solar powered drill or saw or something. It doesn't really say it.
It doesn't say it, but they're just the cordless battery powered Milwaukee's. And at that time they had solar over at the farm because the farm wasn't destroyed at that point. So they were all charged when they went there. That's how I just didn't put it in the book, but that's what I was thinking when I wrote it.
That makes sense. That really makes sense. So tell us about Fartageddon.
Well, I kind of wanted to lighten things up after you had the house that they went and rescued those girls. And because I was like really heavy and deep, and I just kind of wanted to not have the book keep going that direction. So I wanted to lighten that up, but we had actually bought some of the Ready Hour chili mac. Like I said, I've been kind of freaking out, so I just buy some stuff. But my whole thing is buy what you use and use what you buy. And so even though that was what I call Armageddon food, I wanted to see if it was palatable, because most of that stuff is not. It's pretty gross. So one time my son came over and I was like, hey, let's try this. And so we made a package of it, and it was okay. I mean, the comments in the book is exactly what my son said. It's okay. I've had better, but it was palatable. It was good. It was decent. In a situation like that, I think you would probably be digging it. But then the next morning, the next morning we were like, all farting. And it was just the most horrible, like disgusting, like we called it nuclear. Like it was like bad. And it was because of that stuff. And I don't know if it was because of the beans in it or whatever. And so someone made a comment about it being a nuclear war. And I said, yeah, it's like Fartageddon. And then I wrote that scenario in the book. When I got to that point, I wrote that book. I mean, the words, other than them laying in the back of a truck, it was like that whole scenario is almost word for word what we were all laughing about it as a family. So it was kind of fun.
But I think that there's another thing here that you've touched on tangentially that I think is really critically important, and that is you're going to be changing your diet when whatever happens. You're not going to continue eating the same way you are now. Your digestive system, the enzymes that you built up, your probiotics that you have in your gut, everything is set up basically for the habit of how you are eating today. If you dramatically change that habit, you're going to dramatically change how your body processes and disposes of those food products. And so you're going to have a change in bodily functions for a while after an adjustment period as you begin changing over from one form of food to another. And I think we all need, and you know, it's so obvious when you look at it in retrospect, but we need more reality like this in books because it's one of those things we have to take a look at and say, you know what, I didn't really consider that. So what do I need to store up, let's say, for maybe stool softener as I make this transition from normal eating to long-term storage food eating? Do I need to store up on antidiarrheals? What am I going to have to do? Because my body is going to be changing as I'm doing this. What are your predictions?
Well, I would think antidiarrheals isn't like Imodium is a no-brainer, because that'll kill you faster than anything. You get bad water, you're screwed. You're dead if you don't have something to stop it. And so we store that stuff anyways. We just, like I said, we store what we use and use what we store. So we have a year's supply of that stuff sitting around, and every time we empty a bottle, we just buy a new bottle and just rotate it through. But yeah, I mean, you're going to want to have some Pepto, which kind of covers both of that, but not necessarily because of when you change your diet, but diarrhea will kill you real fast. If in a situation where you can't go into a hospital and get, electro IVs or anything, you need to be prepared to stop that,
Well, I tell you, one of the last four things I have as far as notes on the book and then I'm just going to turn it over to you. I want you to tell people about your experience with Katrina and why you got into writing and your influences and everything else. But four things I want to point out that just, I love you. I love you. They have these three girls, 18, 16, and 16 that they rescue. And so they're beginning to teach them how to use self-protection at a firearms range. And one of the guys is kind of a tactical nerd, let's call him. And so somebody calls a magazine a clip, and he really bites into him. And I go, yes, there is a big difference between a magazine and a clip. Thank you for reminding us. I appreciate that. I'm one that, words have specific meanings, and you've got to follow that. This is one that's brand new to me, people. So this is something I learned out of this book. So I encourage you to get this book, because if I'm learning new stuff, then that means that there's a lot of new stuff in here. And he calls it yo-yo. And for yo-yo, Y-O-Y-O, it's you're on your own. And I think that's going to be probably a form of punishment in the future as well. That if you can't adapt to the group, then banishment is going to be even worse than being summarily executed, let's call it. So I had never heard yo-yo before. Also included in this is there is a natural threat that happens, and it basically destroys one area. And evidently you guys get the same kind of monsoons that we had as a kid in El Paso. So, you have to be prepared for natural and weather threats, because this is not going to be a unidimensional thing when the grid goes down or whatever. It's going to be multidimensional. And so your ability to react to weather, your ability, and it's not going to, you're not going to have the advantage of knowing 24 hours in advance either. A lot of things are going to be deprived. You're going to be deprived, and you're going to have to react. And one of those is going to be weather, severe weather, inclement weather. Another part that really scares the living daylights out of me is firefighting. And so with this inclement weather, of course, you have a lightning strike. The lightning strike causes a fire. And then, if you're in a suburban area, if you haven't taken into consideration how are you going to fire a fight? How are you going to fight a fire without any water pressure in your hose? I mean, it's bad enough you're going to use your garden hose to try to fight a fire, right? But if there's no water pressure, how are you going to use that? So how are you going to fight a fire if one happens, especially in a suburban area where houses are maybe 25, 50 feet apart? So I think those are critical things that you need to really take a look at and ask yourself a question on: how are we going to handle this? So I'm going to try to, that's basically where the book ends, is in this firefighting mode. They're getting ready to evacuate to the Alamo, or they're actually in the process of evacuating to the Alamo. And but when we were talking before the show in the backstage, I asked Mr. Grammer a couple questions, and one of them was, what got you into this? Why are you doing it? And he gave me a really good story that I wanted him to share with you about his experience watching such things as Katrina. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you have the last several minutes here just to kind of tell us why you got into this and why you chose to the subject that you did.
Well, I first of all, I've always kind of wanted to write a book. I just never did, for various reasons. And growing up in Utah in the Mormon culture and everything, everyone's a prepper, kind of. I don't really consider myself a prepper because I just consider myself prepared to, but I'm not prepared for the apocalypse. Let's put it that way. But when I was in Seattle when 9/11 hit, and they shut down all the ports, all the planes, everything. And so being close to the ports and the train yard, I lived right next to a train yard, and everything stopped and it was eerily quiet. And we were okay because we had a few months worth of food that we always kept, canned goods, things like that, stuff we ate. But the stores were empty. Like if you went, oh, I don't have this, and you go to the store, they didn't have it. And it took a good month or so to get everything back going. And then so I kind of stepped up a little bit and made sure we had at least 3 months of everything at that point, especially with formula and diapers and that kind, because I was in the midst of, my kids were really young at that point. So we stepped up that kind of stuff, the stuff I would need to have my kids survive. But then when Katrina hit, and I was watching on the news, and I could not believe how badly that was screwed up. And I don't necessarily on the federal, I don't know who screwed it up, but it was just bad. I mean, you had people walking through sewage and all this other stuff. You had reports of them taking people's guns. Well, why did they have their guns? Because there was criminals running around. There was I don't know how many stuff was going on, but then murders or anything was going on, or robberies at the time, because people are going to take advantage of that. And they were taking away people's guns, even out on the bayou, people out, fishing or whatever. They were coming up next to them, and a lot of those people never got their guns back. But then when I saw what was going on at the Superdome, and just the utter failure. And I was thinking, like, these guys, they weren't prepared, and they relied on the government. And that just right there, just basically the government, I already knew this, but that cemented the government's not going to be there. And when something like this happens, if we get a massive earthquake or a massive fire and the grid goes down, infrastructure is damaged massively, it's not going to happen. They're not going to be there. And then during the sickness that we had, I saw even more and more egregious overstep and things. And it just really reminded me, my mom is an immigrant. She was born and raised in Scotland, and everyone thinks Scotland and Britain and Canada and Australia is like America light, like they have freedom and all this other stuff. But the stories that I grew up with, she grew up after World War II, was not the case. They are not. Americans have a special kind of freedom that Americans don't really know until you go somewhere else. So I saw that happening, and I saw some of the things that my mom would tell me about that when she was a kid and what they would do and things like that. I saw that happening then, and then I was just like, okay, I've always wanted to write a book. This is how I can use my voice without being confrontational, being called a crazy nut, and just actually have a positive experience. And so I wrote it in a story that I had in my head, but I also wanted it to be realistic. And I saw with everything coming across the border, I kind of think I was thinking, what is going to happen? What's going to be the most likely? I listen to post-apocalyptic books. I like those. Franklin Horton, Tom Abrams, all those. I listened to them, and I was like, well, what's the most? And I thought EMPs are just overdone. I think it's a cliche at this point when it comes to the post-apocalyptic genre. And I thought, how's this going to happen? And I thought, it's happening right now. As I was watching the news, and I was watching the border, and I was watching all these military people coming across from all these different countries, I thought, how are they going to do it? And I says, well, they're doing it right now. They're going to do it like sleeper cell. They're going to wait. They're going to get everything into position. They're going to wait, and they're going to do it in one day like they did on 9/11, but on steroids. And so that's why I put that in the story, because I think that's a little more realistic. And that's our grid, our infrastructure is so fragile. It doesn't take much it won't take much to take it down. And it doesn't have to be electrical grid. That would be the worst. But I mean, even just if they blow up all the refineries, or some of the ports or something like that. I mean, there's so many different things they could do. And so that's why I wrote the book, this particular story. I've got a lot of stories in my head I'm going to start writing. But yeah, anyway, do you have something else? Another question or anything? Or do you want me to keep going?
Keep going. You're doing great.
And so, but one of the things I love those books, but I think they also put the characters in those books always have so many unrealistic things. Like they have everything, and there's no answer as to why they got those. So I want to, like how we prepare is we just buy more. They have case law sales where I live. I don't know if they do that throughout the rest of the world or country, but every couple times a year you can go in and you can buy a whole case of chili at a special price instead of buying it one can at a time. And so we would stock up on that. And that's how we prepare. We store what we use and we use what we store. But we also have what I call Armageddon food, where we have the freeze-dried stuff and things for the more. But I think most of our stuff is going to be within that first, like if there's a big problem and they can get on top of it, probably 6 months, unless the grid completely, like EMP situation, they'll probably have it under control. So I wanted to give myself that, but I also wanted it to be realistic. Like you can't survive on beans and rice. You just can't.
No.
And some of the things we do is we hunt and we prepare. I butcher all the meat. It's not that hard, actually. You just cut it. Everyone thinks you have to be this butcher or take it in and spend $400 to have someone do your deer. Just take it home and cut it up. I mean, it may not be the same cut you would get, but And I have a meat grinder, so we grind it. We do our own jerky. We do all that stuff ourselves. We also have a little shameless promotion. My wife has a YouTube channel called Salt Creek Farmstead, where we urban homestead. That's what we call it. We call it suburban homesteading. We live on a 1/3 acre, meat rabbits, chickens, large garden, and we prepare. She does some DIY stuff, and we preserve our own food as much as we can. And so I wanted, you don't have to be rich. You don't have to have all this. I mean, there's so many, if you want all the gadgets, like the night vision and things, you can buy those on crappy ones on Amazon for a couple $100. You don't need to have thousands of dollars. One of the things, I'm going to divert here, but one of the things I put in the new book that they use is a drone. They have a cheap drone that they use to recon, because why not? I mean, you can get them for the drone I have is like $100, and it has night vision and everything on it. And so if you need something that's close by where you can just, so that's that kind of stuff that people don't realize you can use it for multiple stuff. I also go into in the new book. I'm an EMT by trade. I was trained as an EMT, and there's so many things you can use for medical that people don't think you can. Like, everyone throws away their old diapers. Well, what are diapers used for? They're used to absorb fluid. So if you have a diaper that's too small for your kid, or your kids are out of diapers, don't throw them away. Put them in your first aid stuff, because it makes a good trauma pack. Things like that. So I try to put a little bit of that stuff in there, because be more realistic and not so gadgety. I've read some of the books, and it just seemed like it was a diary and a list of all their gear. And I didn't want to be that. I wanted to have an interesting story, not a lot of gear. Does that make sense?
I want to share a screen here with you real quick. So let me see here. If I can do it. There we go. So we were talking earlier, and you were talking about all these things that look kind of strange that we haven't seen. And so this is a book that is, and I bought it evidently April 8th of 2023, Unrestricted Warfare, China's Master Plan to Destroy America. And these two colonels of the People's Liberation Army Navy talk in it about how they're going to have a whole bunch of different uncollatable events that basically there's going to be different points in our infrastructure that are taken out, that you can't take any 2 points and say, that's an obvious attack, or these two are directly related. But when you stand back and take a look, they've destroyed, say, 20 or 25% of the total infrastructure, and we still haven't put the pieces together.
Yeah, and like we were talking earlier, I don't know if people are aware about all the different food processing plants that have been burned, planes run into them. It's just the statistical that's just not practical at all. Like, I think there was 24 at the last count that had something like fires, just that amount of fires on that stuff. And you also look at all the chicken farms that have just mysteriously burned down, and then now they're saying they have to cull the flocks because of the avian deal there. But and then you have all these train derailments. It's just one or two is okay, but I saw a video and there was just a lot, way more than you would think. And it could be who the judge's fault. We don't know. But it just doesn't make sense that when you put everything together, you can't say something's going on, but you can't not say that something's going on.
Right.
And so it's just kind of like, that makes me want to step up more. Like, I bought a bunch of metal, like the old jerry can style gas cans. They're about $30 a piece. So plastic ones, 25. I bought 3 or 4 of those off of Amazon. So I have some metal gas cans, because the plastic ones I have, we use them when we go 4-wheeling and stuff, and they crack, and they only last a few years. So I bought some of those. So I always have enough gas to have a full truck if I don't have a full truck. Just because some of this stuff, I don't know. There's just too much going on to say nothing's going on.
I've got 3 gas cans out in the garage, but I haven't filled them yet, simply because they have that new EPA nozzle on it. and I'm 72. So trying to lift 40 pounds worth of gasoline in a 5-gallon bucket and then push on it to get that nozzle to operate in order to get it out of the bucket and into the truck, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I bought the adapter kits where you can basically change that back to the old style nozzle. So it'll be safer for me to use. And but I haven't gotten my drill out yet and accomplished that changeover. But do the metal ones have those same pouring issues as the new plastic ones?
No, actually, it's just like, the old school Jeep jerry can. It has, you unscrew the spout and it has the spout in it that you pull and you screw it in and it's all O-ring. Then you have the old yellow vent. This one, you just unscrew it, stays in place, but you just unscrew it to vent and then it just pours. In fact, it pours so fast that I spill it more than I fit in the lawnmower.
Wow.
So, but it has a long nozzle. It's like this long where you can actually fit it past your trap in your gas tank. Because a lot of them have those traps so people can't siphon. So it'll actually be long enough to go past that trap and fill your gas tank, and you won't need a funnel. But you could get it would be easier to use a funnel because of how awkward the can is. But I was surprised. I mean, you can get them up to like $100, but you can get some cheap Chinese. They're 20 liters. They're not 5 gallons, but they're just like cheap, metal gas cans, like we had when we were kids.
So we've got a real good comment by Utah Mike, and I don't want to click on it because I want to keep this up where people can go over to see Gray Man Gill when we finish this discussion. But he's talking about the fire department says that 30 gallons max storage in your home. And I want to caution you that applies not only to gasoline, but any other flammable sources. So there was a guy I heard who had a large cache of ammunition and flammables, and his house burned up. And when he filed for his homeowner's insurance to replace the house, the insurance company denied the claim because he had an abnormal amount of flammables and explosives that were stored in the house. And so one of the things you have to be careful of as we're preparing is, you have to weigh the consequences of what you're doing with the parameters of your firefighting capabilities or your insurance capabilities or anything else, because unless you can afford to sacrifice your house if you lose your gas and bullets, you're probably going to want to stay within the limits of what your insurance company sells you or tells you is all they're going to insure.
I would suggest everyone buy a fireproof safe for all their ammunition anyways. That's the last thing you want, is to have a firefighter die because you have 10,000 bullets that you didn't secure. But one of the things you can do, I only keep 15 gallons at the house full, but I have the cans empty all the time so I can run and fill them. But you can build a shed, 30, 40 feet back. If you have the property to do it, build a shed about 25 or 30 feet away from the house. And they have around here, the college, BYU has an auction every year, and they get rid of old stuff. And so you can get the flammable container, the flammable cases that they have for their liquids for $20, $30, and it secures your flammables, and that's considered safe storage. They just don't want you to have them floating around your garage. But yeah, if you have ammo, go buy whatever safe company you like that's got at least a 2-hour rating and fill it full. I have an old pop machine that I'm going to turn into an ammo safe. But it's, if you can find an old pop machine, take out all the innards, and then you can line it with some sheetrock to further fireproof it, and then just store your ammo in it. That's what a lot of people do around here.
Yeah, Triple G is saying get in a metal outbuilding if you can, and that's a great solution. I saw a comment, I think it was Butch Graves earlier, was talking about, let me see if I can find it, about getting a 12 volt. Here it is. You can get an electric fuel pump, 12 volt, and you can transfer fuel from, I guess, a canister or whatever into wherever you need using your car battery. So that's a great idea as well. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to go ahead and get this closed down so that y'all can go over and visit with Gil on Gray Man Prepping. I'm going to stay here for a couple minutes with Mr. Grammer. I tell you what I am going to do here real quick is if anybody would like, I'm going to end the live. However, and I think Triple G will probably be one of these people, I am going to put the, okay, so I've got the code here for invite you to the live. So if anybody would like to hang out for maybe 5-10 minutes afterwards, as we get this closed up, if you would like to ask Mr. Grammer any final questions, just 5 or 10 minutes. We don't want to stay on too long. Thankful for the time that he's given us. One last question, and I think this is the most important question of the evening. Can people contact you for an autographed version of your book? And if so, how do they do that?
Yes, you can message me on Facebook through my Facebook John Grammer Writer page. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And then, you know, I've got copies. I can sign them. If you're local, you can bring me your copy and I'll sign them. But if you want to just order straight from me, it's the same price, but you don't get the free shipping from Amazon, of course. But anytime, that's the easiest way to do it. Is just contact me through Facebook Messenger and I'll get it out to you. Okay.
So, and Pat says it's wise to have both laxatives and antidiarrheals. So yes, and don't forget your electrolyte replacements. Absolutely essential. When I got home from surgery today, my mouth has been dry like you would not believe. And of course they had me, I don't know why they do it, but they dehydrate you for the day before surgery. And then of course, you know, when they try to put the IV in, you got dehydrated veins, and it would seem as if they would want you to have more fluids, so your veins are at full capacity when they stick you. But yeah, so getting my electrolytes back in place afterwards, I think I can still taste the anesthesia most of the day today. But thanks, everybody. Head over to Gil's. We're going to close this down, and I'm going to have about another 5 minutes with Mr. Grammer, and then I'll see you all over there. Thanks, Shenanigans. Great to see you here. If you want to join us, then there's that link, and feel free to join us for about 5 minutes. Okay, take care, everybody. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.